Hi everyone, great to be back, and really that was after quite an incredible day, quite a emotional day, interesting day, enlightening day. So let me just go through a few things that we did today, and yeah, I hope they're really interesting. So first in the morning, we went to the St George's Cathedral, and I think one of the things for me today was going to places that I hadn't been. We were in the visitors centre, and we were addressed by Dean Hossan Naum, who is the Dean of St George's Cathedral and responsibility for the Anglican community in Israel and in a number of countries around as well. A fascinating individual, lots of really interesting insights, grappling with texts of the New Testament that might be negative about interfaith in favour of an approach that favours relationship to others. And not, in a sense, looking at the superiority of Christianity over other religions as well. So that was really something really interesting for me. He talked about the Christian community and the difficulties of the Christian community in Israel and in, of course, the territories as well. He's Israeli, and so for him Israel is a given, and he's obviously part of that state. But an interesting statement he made in terms of the Balfour Declaration. Balfour is important, of course, because it's a century since Balfour in 1917, November 17, was the Balfour Declaration, the first intimation really of the importance of a Jewish homeland by, in a sense, a big power by Britain. And he says for him it was important, it was real, but that a Palestinian state, in a sense, is now also important as a realization of Balfour. So that Balfour firstly is Zionist in the sense of it being a Jewish homeland, but that a completion in the sense of the vision of stability in the Holy Land would also include a Palestinian state. And I think that's important and a really interesting sentiment. So that was first. We heard also a talk afterwards about the varying communities, the varying Christian communities, from a lady called Hannah Bendikovsky, who works in an organisation that creates dialogue between Christian and Jewish communities, looks at curriculum and interventions educationally. And I think one of the interesting things from her perspective, and we heard this a number of times, is that for Jews in Israel, they often don't know about Christians. They might go abroad and meet people of other faiths, but to actually understand Christians, worshipping Christians and what they do, there isn't much connection. There's Christian community obviously in the north. There are a large Palestinian community, Palestinian Christian community, and also, interesting enough, communities such as the Filipino community, which is a Catholic community, and Russians that came on Aliyah through the law of return, who aren't halakhically Jewish, who might not be Jewish at all, and also will go to Russian Orthodox churches, who suddenly now have seen in the recent years a revival of those attending. Fascinating different facets of the Christian community. In the afternoon, we went with a left-wing NGO to an organisation called Ir Amim. So this is a left-wing NGO which took us on a tour of Palestinian neighbourhoods of East Jerusalem. And a lot of issues here, of course, with how we call these neighbourhoods. On the one hand, we may well call them neighbourhoods of Jerusalem. They're in East Jerusalem, and dotted amongst the Palestinian neighbourhoods, you've got also new and older Jewish neighbourhoods, such as Gilo, which is quite old, and Ramat Shlomo, but also Har Choma, and now, which is new, which is in the last 15 years, has been built up to be quite a large neighbourhood, and now they talk about building on Givat Amatos. And so this is the question really, is to how do we view it? For the Palestinians, of course, the sense is that and for many in the world, that these neighbourhoods are settlements across the Green Line, but for many of us, they are neighbourhoods in Jerusalem, and many, of course, look at Jerusalem as a town which shouldn't be divided. But at the same time, going back to the Clinton parameters in 2000, a solution put forward right at the end of Oslo was that the Eastern Jerusalem Arab neighbourhoods, Palestinian Arab neighbourhoods, would be part of a Palestinian state and would be their capital. And the Jewish neighbourhoods would, of course, be part of a Jerusalem that would be a Jewish capital. Something interesting to think about. And what we did see was vast differences between the economic levels of Palestinian neighbourhoods and, of course, Jewish neighbourhoods. And yeah, lots of issues around land and settlement there. Really fascinating, and for me a mirror image of the years I lived in Efrat. It doesn't make me feel bad about living in Efrat and the territories. I loved it, and still, for me, the land is Eretz Israel. But it is important to look at moving forward towards a two-state solution, and we have to think about what that means and how to move forward for that and the issues that throws up. We heard Rabbi David Rosen, who does large amount of very important interfaith work, is the head of really important organizations, and he also talks about the Christian community. And then Naomi Chazan, who was once the deputy speaker of the Knesset, another left-wing leader, but a very fascinating individual, and also showed that even on the left, and she was the head of the Meretz party, one of the leaders of Meretz, which is quite far left, even on that left you can still be a passionate Zionist. And a number of times she talked about the importance for her of Israel as a Jewish state, but for her it only is completed. And thinking about this 50 years after 1967, when Israel in a sense moves towards ending the occupation of what we may well call Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, in order for there to be a Palestinian state. I did question that maybe also there is a responsibility for Palestinian leadership to do something about that, but I suppose her approach was, look, it's our responsibility, and sometimes you can't talk about the other. We've got to get on and do what we need to do and prepare ourselves for that may be possibly eventual solution. So lots of stuff today that was quite interesting, difficult. I felt within me this sort of split in a way between myself as someone who lived in Efrat, who is a Zionist, who is religious, who believes in Eretz Israel, but also that sense of feeling the need not to ignore the reality for Palestinians in East Jerusalem, in municipal Jerusalem, and in the West Bank. So more tomorrow, and I hope you enjoyed that. Bye bye.